Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, April 24th, 2026, and our dear friend, our brother, Patrick Henningsen is here with us. Welcome back, Patrick.
That's great to be with you, Nima.
Patrick, let's start with the latest news about Iranian foreign minister is going. He said he posted on his X account that he's going to go. He has a tour going to Islamabad, then to Muscat in Oman, and later on he's going to be in Moscow. And he said, the last sentence in this post was that our neighbors are our priority. That's why he's doing this. And later on, we've learned from CNN, they're talking about that Donald Trump is preparing Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to be sent to Islamabad. The problem is that the Iranian team said that it's not on their plan. And even we had some news in Iranian media, in Persian media, saying that there is no condition, the situation is not there. They're not there to talk with the United States. And it's a visit on the part of Iranian delegation, the Iranian foreign minister to Islamabad. It's part of as I said, it was part of the tour. But it seems that Donald Trump is insisting to send Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to Islamabad to talk with Iranians. Your understanding of what's going on?
Well, I guess he's looking for things for Witkoff and Kushner to do so they can appear useful or something. They're not getting enough golf rounds in the links in Long Island, but no, it's kind of a running joke at this point. What this is just basically another signal to the United States that the world isn't just going to drop what they're doing in order to accommodate whatever Washington's saying. So it's like, we're sending our envoys, our special envoys to Islamabad. Whatever you've got organized, you can put that off to the side. You got to see our guys. So they're wanting to be involved. The pattern here is unmistakable, Nima. Who called for the ceasefire? It wasn't Iran. And who wants to extend the ceasefire? It's not Iran. And extend it again. It's not Iran. That's the United States. Normally, the party that's losing or the party that's at a disadvantage will beg for a ceasefire, and the United States begged for a ceasefire. If you believe the press conferences of Pete Hegseth and the confident statements of Donald Trump, you think that they've got it all under control, and Iranians are going to learn the lesson to bend to the will of American power, or we're just going to destroy them. If that's the case, why did they ask for a ceasefire? So I think a couple of things are clear. Donald Trump has no suitable exit here. He's got no suitable exit. If he withdraws now, the embarrassment, it's almost like admitting defeat to accept Iranian terms. He can't. Politically, he can't. In his mind, I think he could. If he was smart, he would, and he would sell it and package it in such a way to make it seem like a victory. But they're so dug in with this American dominance narrative that they're afraid. And so he can't do that. He can't withdraw. He can't pull the other card, which is what the MAGA card, the original MAGA card was, hey, it's not our war. We're not the world's policemen. We don't care what happens in the Strait. Remember that? We don't care about the Persian Gulf. We don't get any of our energy from there. Nothing to do with us. The Europeans need to step up. Then 2 weeks later, he's like, no, we got to control that. So if we withdrew and said, we're not going to be the world's policeman in the Persian Gulf, well, you're basically leaving Israel pretty much on its own. And the lobby in America won't allow that. So that's off the table. So those are the two main positions that would make sense from a U.S. interest point of view, you could say. But they can't. Those are off limits. Those are blocked for Trump. And the other one is to escalate. The other one is to cover up this catastrophe with another catastrophe, with another layer of crisis. And that's what all the signals, Nima, are very clear. They're pointing to. So the inability to come to any agreement, the inability to conduct kind of mature, logical international relations, just the bare basics, by the way. I mean, we're talking undergrad level diplomacy and international relations. The Trump administration can't even manage that. They're really incompetent. Donald Trump is probably one of the worst deal makers in history. That is part of his book was The Art of the Deal. But, building a casino in Atlantic City and trying to undo an undeclared illegal war of aggression, and the level of the mess that's happened globally as a result of this war, trying to undo that with a deal, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. And you can't be ignorant of history. You can't be ignorant of other countries' political interests and sensitivities. And just basically, you can't be ignorant of the security architecture of the region, a post-U.S. security architecture, because isn't that what we're talking about? We're talking about a post-U.S. Persian Gulf. There's no place for the U.S. in there, and nobody has admitted this in the Trump administration. They're talking like they're talking like things are as they were a year ago. They're not. This is not the same Persian Gulf. This is not the same Middle East. It will never be the same. So their inability to kind of confront and accept these realities and their own sort of incompetence of their negotiators, of their Secretary of State, who's basically AWOL. Marco Rubio is not even like, nobody knows where he is, what he's doing. I guess he's planning the invasion of Cuba at the moment. Another illegal war. They're planning to invade Cuba. So that's what Rubio's busy doing, stealing oil and imposing illegal blockades on U.S. neighbors. So he can't even be bothered to even show up or do, even weigh in on this war. So it shows you this is a dysfunctional government. They have one choice, which is they have to double down. They can't admit they're wrong, and they have to double down. And, as far as Israel goes, Israel's not able to defend itself right now. That's pretty clear. If hostilities start, there's going to be big problems for Israel, physically, politically, militarily, economically. It's all going to continue to get worse. So this also opens the door for, there's a lot of talk about the deployment of nuclear weapons. And I find this to be very disconcerting and quite shocking and frightening that people are talking about this in such a casual way, as if that's some kind of a justifiable solution to a war that the U.S. and Israel started. So it's lies upon lies you hear from the West, from the Western side now. Well, lies upon lies. They're piling it on now because they don't want people to look at the root causes of how this began. And really, this began with the withdrawal of the JCPOA under Trump's first term. That was the timer that set in motion a course of events that led us to this war, that gave them the pretext to escalate, and under the fake claim, the completely fabricated claim that Iran is developing a nuclear weapon, completely fake. And they had to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, which was a perfectly acceptable international treaty. Iran wasn't developing one anyway, but the JCPOA under Obama just gave a double guarantee that they wouldn't be developing one. So, I mean, it's even the best of both worlds for everybody. But by withdrawing from that, it creates a narrative that, oh, look, no, there's no nuclear deal in place. Iran's definitely developing a nuclear weapon. Then Trump will turn around now, so many years later, 8 years, 9 years later, and say the JCPOA was put Iran on the path to a nuclear weapon. It's just unbelievable how they can sell this to an increasingly stupid U.S. public and an increasingly brain dead Fox News and what's left of the MAGA base audience, because that's what you're dealing with here. There's people in America who believe any of this, these half-baked talking points. They really need to get their heads checked. Not to mention, I think half of Trump's cabinet needs to be breathalyzered and be drug tested immediately, because the things that are coming out of the White House are quite insane at the moment.
Yeah. Patrick, the concept of blockade is to put pressure, economic pressure on Iran. This is a country, for many of us, I think, they were under the sanctions of the United States for such a long time, more than 46 years. Then they know how to deal with economic difficulties. And the United States is not, yes, today I talked with Larry Johnson. He mentioned that mostly at the best, they are able to control 10% of, this traffic in and out of the Persian Gulf. at best, and that's totally manageable for Iranian government. But looking at the situation right now, do you think, it seems to me that Donald Trump knows, is getting to the point to understand that this blockade is not working? Yesterday, we've learned, for example, IRGC Navy vessel, escorting one of these tankers to the Persian Gulf, and nobody did. The U.S. Navy tried to seize that. They couldn't do that because of the IRGC. There's some sort of confrontation showing the force, two sides. And it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better for the United States in that region. Iran is in its region. The United States is a guest to that region, or somehow it's foreigner to that region. And what does that mean? Do you think that it's going to bring new escalations, new cycles of war? And how far that would, bring any sort of constructive outcome for the United States?
Well, first of all, a blockade, a military blockade of Iranian ports or Iranian shipping, that's an act of war. So first and foremost, that disqualifies any negotiations. It's not going to happen. There'll be no peace settlement. So the idea that Iran must come to the table while you're imposing a blockade on them, while you're boasting, Pete Hegseth is on television on front of the press conference, boasting that the United States is basically apprehending Iranian commercial ships, calling them black fleets, and say we're going to pursue them all over the world with our Navy. Okay. I mean, and accusing Iran of piracy, while the U.S. are the biggest pirates right now on the planet, using the U.S. Navy as basically a privateer force, naval force for this on behalf of the state of Israel, which is basically what they're doing. So that's that, and ratcheting up sanctions at the same time by the United States, again, another act of war. So in terms of the Straits of Hormuz, what people need to understand is quite simple, that from an international law point of view, the United States has not a leg to stand on. If you look at the International Convention of the Law of the Seas in 1982, two countries did not ratify that international treaty. One of them was Iran. Iran did not ratify that convention. So they did not opt into that. And guess what the other country that did not ratify? That would have been like freedom of movement through all waterways, etc. Okay. Iran said no. They reserve the right to exercise control over their near abroad, the Strait of Hormuz. The United States did not ratify that either. So legally, the United States doesn't have a leg to stand on in terms of maritime law, firstly. Okay. Secondly, both Iran and Oman extended their territorial waters, over the last 50 years to basically to the point where they're both touching each other in the Straits of Hormuz. So there is no sort of daylight in terms of international waterways there. That's the second thing. Third, this is a war situation. Iran is at war. The U.S. and Israel declared war on Iran. Even if they didn't do an official declaration, they undertook an undeclared war of aggression against a sovereign state, a sovereign UN member state. Okay, so because of that, and in the laws of war and precedent, Iran is well within its rights until this conflict is resolved to take control of the Straits of Hormuz, until such a time where there's some kind of an interim accord and eventually a treaty. It's very simple. So back to the original point, Nima, the inability of the United States to be agreement capable, especially this Trump administration. But Biden had this problem as well with regards to Russia, U.S. and Russia, and all of their various agreements and anything in Ukraine. So Trump is even worse by like orders of magnitude. So that means that they cannot resolve the situation. Now, Trump they will turn around and say, well, it's not our problem. We don't recognize international law. We're the USA. Well, actually, no. The United States, what they have opted into in terms of the Geneva Conventions and all of these other international treaties, and to do with, like, let's say, for instance, they're saying now they're giving the order that they're going to fire on Iranian boats and kill kill them all, basically. That's against U.S. law, because the United States adopted all of these things after World War II that will constrain the U.S. military and constrain the U.S. from doing what everyone was doing during the time before that, which is committing heinous acts of war. That's why all these conventions were put into place and ratified by the U.S. Congress. Ratified by the U.S. Congress. So that's the law of the land under the Supremacy Clause of the United States law and Constitution. So that's mandated. So to opt out of this, you have to undo all of that legislation in the U.S. So Trump is completely out of U.S. law, in violation of U.S. law. So it's illegal by the American legal standard, and it's illegal internationally what they're doing. And they have no claim whatsoever in terms of telling Iran what to do with the Straits of Hormuz. And Iran has every right to do what it's doing internationally. So all indications, Nima, are the failure of negotiations, the inability of the U.S. to act as a normative power in the international system, and then the threats by this administration, and also the movement of U.S. military assets and another carrier strike group coming around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, heading towards the Indian Ocean. I believe that's the USS George H.W. Bush and that strike group, to join two other strike groups, one of which is already in the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, in that area, and the other coming from Greece in the northern Red Sea, the USS Gerald Ford, which, funny enough, I don't know if it's going to go any further south through the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. That's also a problem. But more likely, it's going to provide potential assistance for Israel in defending Israel, but also to defend the port of Yanbu, Saudi Arabia's petrol line, east-west pipeline. This used to bypass the Straits of Hormuz. That will be a target when hostilities resume by Iranian missiles. So it looks like that carrier strike group includes not just the aircraft carriers, but the destroyers that are escorting it with missile interceptor capabilities. So it looks like they're preparing for war, Nima. And that's the inevitable conclusion that we can come to here. And if they avoid war, if we avoid war in this case, it will be because they're extending to try to find something to do, some other way to kind of. Trump is all about micromanagement. He likes to micromanage and repaint the lines on the pitch as the game proceeds. Change the touch line on the field basically during the game. That's how Donald Trump rolls when he does things, and he thinks that somehow he'll find the magic formula there to get the deal he wants. But this is not building an apartment complex in Manhattan. This is totally different. So Donald Trump is totally out of his depth as an individual. He's well past his level of incompetence right now as president of the United States, and everybody in America knows this. He's the laughingstock of the world. He will go down in history as probably easily the worst U.S. president in the history of the country, and that will be in the future as well. He has already etched. That's his legacy. He thinks that he's going to get an aircraft carrier named after him and a big statue of him in Washington. It's not going to happen. And it's for all those reasons that we have just outlined.
I think the problem that he's facing, that his enemy has to help him to get out of it. This is the problem. We had the ceasefire, then he unilaterally extended the ceasefire. Iran somehow perceive what is going on with this game because they don't want to be in the game to help the Donald Trump saving face with what he's confronting right now. And then you see right now, there is no way for Donald Trump unless Iran decides to help him. It's impossible. It's considering what is going on in Iran, the nature and the the way that they're talking about the conflict, there is no way for Donald Trump saving face. And he's going to, a lot of difficulty. I think all the signs, as you've mentioned, we are heading towards some sort of escalation, a new cycle of war, because Iran would prefer to have a war, to put a lot of pressure, even making the case worse for Donald Trump, in just not going in a direction to help him. This is the reality that he's facing. I don't know if he perceives that or he's trying desperately, to do something else, because it doesn't seem that Iran is willing to play the way he wants Iran to play to help him.
I think probably on a subconscious level, he probably realizes he's, been outmaneuvered. He's put himself into pretty much an unwinnable position. But like you said, he's trying to get Iran to help bail him out a little bit. It's like come to the negotiations table. But then maybe this has something. I mean, I'm not a psychologist here, but a sociopath will convince himself that there's a solution when subconsciously he's preparing to sabotage. Once they get the other person to the table to make a compromise, then he'll attack again. That's the basic mind of a malignant narcissist or a psychopath or a serial killer or something like that. So that's kind of how Donald Trump's brain's wired. Is he will convince himself that he sincerely wants a solution, but then when he gets them to the table, he will then attack. And that's just in his nature. That's how he doesn't have the temperament or I think the intellectual depth or ability to do this job that he is in, sadly, that he was elected to do. And he's way out of his depth. He's put himself in a position where he's out of his depth. If he avoided war in the first place, the reason people elected this guy, this clown, this embarrassment, this train wreck of a man, the reason he was elected is because people believed that he promised that he wouldn't get the United States into any more stupid wars, especially in the Middle East. He was elected on that basis. So we all knew as Americans, or at least those of us who were, paying attention, knew that if he kept to those promises, he'd probably be okay focusing on the domestic political situation and, just maintaining good relations with other countries and improving trade and so forth. But we got the opposite in the last year and a half. We got literally the diametric opposite of all of those things. So he's not capable to get himself out of this situation. Other forces have taken over. His administration domestically now, and also the Israelis are really, I think, in total control of the White House right now. And they're even telling the U.S., Israel Katz, the defense minister, is basically saying, we're going to be attacking Iranians. We're going to be killing Iranians. And the United States, he's almost sending us a signal to the U.S. that you're going to have to back us up because we're going to attack again. So that's what the defense minister is saying there. So meanwhile, Trump's just vacillating. He can't decide what his own narrative is. Whether it's, we got to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons. They're killing their own people. They're about to hang these 8 women, and I just intervened to stop it. Something was going to take place, and then he's saying that, now he's saying, higher gas prices, economic depression. That's a price you're going to have to pay because I just saved you from Iran getting a nuclear weapon. So he's saying, do you want to have a nuclear armed Iran or high gas prices? Basically, you have to choose. So you're going to take high gas prices, and we'll take care of Iran's nukes. So he's creating it's a straw man argument. This is like a level of propaganda nobody has ever seen before in America. And let me tell you, America, this is one of the most propagandized societies in the history of the human race. Okay. We have a propaganda machine in America that is the most awe-inspiring, powerful, massive manufacturing of consent, disinformation machine that the world has ever known. I mean, it is really immense. And what they're pushing out now is something that nobody that I've spoke to has ever seen in their lifetime. I mean, Pete Hegseth, this news presenter that's been put in charge of the Pentagon, he basically comes out in the press conference today and says, or yesterday afternoon, I think, but he says, you know who deserves the Nobel Peace Prize? The U.S. military deserves the Nobel Peace Prize because we're keeping the world safe. The world just doesn't appreciate us. We should get it every single year. The U.S. military should get the Nobel Peace Prize. So that you can't underestimate the level of delusionality here and just pure sociopathy by these people who are, mediocre in terms of their ability to perform the jobs in which they've been installed into. And you're seeing the results now. It is just a train wreck, the likes of that nobody's ever seen before. And we're all just praying that these people don't blow up the world. That we're just praying at this point that Donald Trump or the Israelis don't pull the nuclear card in order to rescue themselves, to get themselves out of the mess they created. And the global economy, I don't even want to go there, Nima, because right now the global economy is already hitting the wall. You're already seeing Southeast Asia, fuel shortages, business shutdowns. You're going to start seeing bankruptcies, liquidations. There's whole manufacturing sectors that are shut down. It's like COVID level, system level perturbations. Okay. That's already happening. That will eventually come west now because the paper market of futures trading and derivatives and all this stuff, it's now converging with the material reality on the ground because all of the reserves are expended in terms of oil, floating gas reserves, and so forth. So pretty much, the real price is going to emerge, and the market will do its corrections. And right now, jet fuel shortages globally. This is going to be everything from transportation, delivery, employment. So we're looking at a global recession right now, as of this week. And if this continues, if they keep messing around with this unwinnable war, this disaster, then we're looking at a global depression, which will begin well and truly, probably a lot quicker than people think, but it will start hitting hard in June and July. Maybe they have a month, the month of May, to sort of, stay in la la land. Everybody in America can go to their barbecues and pretend that nothing's happening because the U.S. Is energy independent. Okay. But that's not going to save all the supply chains that are right now being absolutely obliterated by what the United States and Israel have done to the world, which is to start this war, which they thought was going to be over in a week. And here we are. And Donald Trump says, it's only been 4 weeks. No, Donald. It's not been 4 weeks. It's not been 6 weeks. We're already into month number 3 as of this next week. Okay. So he's even trying to underestimate. Again, this just typical of this president trying to downplay his own catastrophic errors and try to sell this as some kind of a win. This is really going to blow up in his face and in the face of the U.S. government, and it's going to create a political crisis going up into the midterms. I think it's really a catastrophe is gaining steam right now.
I think he keeps comparing the war with Iran in the Middle East to what has happened in Vietnam, which why is he doing this? Because he's in his mind that is the time of the duration of that war is comparable to what's going on in the Middle East. So they were fighting for years. That I am 4 weeks, 6 weeks in this war against Iran, so I have a lot of time. I have no pressure on me. But it's totally the opposite, because the Vietnam War, we know it was a tragedy, but after all, it didn't hit the global economy the way that the case of Iran is hitting the global economy. And it's totally different, 2 different scenarios, and even they're not even comparable. On any scale. But he keeps bringing that up.
No, he's lying. Trump is so funny once he gets a soundbite in his head. He's not very, his intellectual capacity he's got ADHD or something, or he just can't grab onto, like, he's not interested in actually knowing what he's saying. He just that sounds good. He says, how long have we been in the confidently? This is the U.S. president. This is a guy that dodged the Vietnam draft. Okay, he went out. I don't know how many medical dispensations he got for his bone spurs or whatever, but he actively, and he's probably quite proud of the fact that he's a draft dodger. But he's saying that we're in the Vietnam for 18 years. We're in the Vietnam War for 18 years. Where does he get this number, 18 years? Because the U.S. did not engage in combat operations in Vietnam until after the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And if I have my math correct, I believe the Gulf of Tonkin incident was 1964. I'm not looking it up right now, but let's say it's 1964. And then the official end of combat operations would have been, I believe, the Paris Accords. I believe that was in 1972 or 1973. 1973, I'm just guessing. Again, that's 8 years and 6 months or something like that, okay? That's how long combat operations were for Vietnam, not 18 years. It should matter to a U.S. president, just out of respect for, all of the hundreds of thousands. And by the way, the U.S. did not lose only 56,000 soldiers in Vietnam. Many, many more died after they came home. Okay, there are a lot of excess deaths, plus Agent Orange, all of that. Not to mention, forget about the 2 million Vietnamese, Laotian, and Cambodian civilians that died. They don't count, obviously, from a U.S. point of view. Any Arabs or anybody in Southeast Asia is Africa, subhuman. They don't count. All that counts is dead U.S. soldiers in U.S. wars of conquest. But so he's lying. It's just disrespectful to the history, to all the people that gave their lives for another stupid war by Uncle Sam. Nothing to be proud of, the Vietnam War. Nothing to be proud of as an American. And Donald Trump just can't even he's not even in the neighborhood. So where he got that number, 18 years, is Stephen Miller, or one of the sort of, geniuses that works for him, went to Wikipedia. And it said this was the duration of the Vietnam conflict from, as a post-colonial French insurgency, and then U.S. advisors coming in. This isn't advisors coming in. This is the U.S. deploying the full force of their Air Force and Navy against the Islamic Republic of Iran, and threatening them with civilizational annihilation and expending munitions at a rate never seen before in the modern era. Okay, this is not sending military advisors to help fight the Viet Cong. So it's like if he can't get that right in terms of U.S. basic history, then I have no confidence that this person can process what's actually happening today in any meaningful sense. He's just kind of an ignoramus. You could pick somebody off the street that's probably got a better grasp of these issues than Donald Trump does. But he's just play acting like president, because for him, it's just another kind of extension of a reality TV show. He just goes from one press opportunity to the next, and he has got the sound bites, and he says, well, and the Korean War, how long was that? How long was that? This is nothing. So because this isn't like dragging on for years, shut up. Stop criticizing us. This is an unprecedented military victory. It's not. It's an illegal war. This is not going to go down as a victory, Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and everybody else in the Trump administration. It can't be a victory in the history books. It's an illegal war. It's a war crime. You're guilty of war crimes. Every single U.S. serviceman and officer that's executing illegal orders is also historically and legally guilty of war crimes. Every single minute you continue this war, it's illegal. It's not going to be a victory. Just like, unless you're like Philip K. Dick, imagining what happened if the man in the high castle, that the Nazis won the Second World War. That's kind of a glorious Victor writing history there. The Japanese and the Nazis, like the Philip K. Dick novel. So that's fantasy land. But that's where the Trump administration is. They're envisioning, like the Reich, that they're going to rule the world and be the greatest thing on the planet. And this is just one big conquest. It's not going to end like that. It's not going to end like it's not even going in that direction right now. So it's really hard to take it seriously. Anything that these people are saying in Washington right now, I think they don't have a grip on it. The only chance would be some kind of a dramatic removal of this president, either resigning for health reasons or a military coup. Perhaps that might work. I can't believe we're even saying this. I would never have imagined this in my lifetime, but it's kind of reached that sort of period where that's what would have to happen. So, and the Straits of Hormuz are not closed. They go on TV saying Iran has closed the Straits. They're not. They're closed for some people, but they're open for others. So that's like a fundamental lie that the U.S. government and the media are telling their own people. So they're making the U.S. blockade, which is an act of war, which is illegal. They're making this blockade seem like it's reciprocal and it's somehow justified. So like on every level, it's a lie. Everything that Trump is saying about the Iranians, that they've been killing Americans for 47 years, that's a lie. The U.S. has been killing Iranians. The Iranians have not been killing Americans. They say, oh, they killed our soldiers in Iraq with IED roadside bombs and slaughtered our men in Iraq. Oh, hold on for a minute. That was Iraqi resistance. Wait a minute. Didn't you invade and occupy Iraq under false pretenses? Fake weapons of mass destruction claims, like the fake Iran nuclear weapons claims that you're trying to pull right now? Same exact thing. So you're occupying Iraq, and there's an Iraqi resistance that are pushing back against U.S. soldiers who are legitimate targets in that sense. And you're blaming that on Iran, claiming Iran's been killing America. So they're just using these lies to motivate the American people to back this illegal war. That's all they're doing. No apology or anything spoken about the United States shooting down Iranian passenger airliners and killing everybody on board. That doesn't come into the conversation. If you did that to America, you'd have American people out in the street saying death to Iran if Iran did that to American passenger airlines. But America does it, and the president at the time, George H.W. Bush, who they named that aircraft carrier that's pulling up right now past Madagascar, he said he refused to apologize. I don't apologize for the actions of the United States of America, said George H.W. Bush at the time in the 1980s. So, and the lies just continue that the JCPOA was a bad deal. No, it wasn't a bad deal. It was a good deal. And now he wants to, he'd kill for that deal right now, Donald Trump. He'd kill for it. But he is killing, but he's not going to get that deal. So that window is closed. It's not going to happen. He had that deal. He had a better deal, in fact, during the last round of negotiations with the Omanis. You couldn't get a better deal than that. But the thing is, the U.S. is not capable. And Iran now knows that even if they sign a deal with this president or the U.S., they can come back and attack them periodically at any point in the future. So they go build their infrastructure. They rebuild their petrochemical production and distribution. The U.S. and Israel, or they'll rebuild their civilian nuclear power plants. And Israel and the U.S. reserve the right, because it's an undeclared war of aggression, to come periodically and destroy Iranian infrastructure. Well, it's not going to fly. It's not going to work. Not to mention the fact that Iran reserves the right to retaliate in kind. And then the West and Israel say, this is unacceptable. They're terrorizing us. Oh, poor Israelis have to run to the bomb shelters in Tel Aviv. They're traumatized. We can't allow this to happen. And so, they're kind of opening up a narrative that the only way to stop Iran, because Iran won't surrender, it's the same type of narrative that the United States deployed to justify dropping 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is that the Japanese are fierce fighters. They're not going to surrender. So we must use nuclear weapons to bring this awful war to a close and to, quote, save lives. That's and to stop the economic catastrophe that's resulted from this war. and the disruptions in trade and supply routes. And same type of justifications was made at the end of the Second World War. They would deploy as similar talking points here to justify using weapons of mass destruction against a country that doesn't have them. So that's my worry, is that if the U.S. and Israel continue to paint themselves into a worse and worse position, then it's almost like they're the only way for them to come out, because they won't admit defeat, they won't admit they're wrong, they won't cop and be accountable. Their only way out is to double down, because that's the Israeli mentality. And Donald Trump, might as well be flying an Israeli flag over the White House at this point, because his words and actions are indistinguishable from Benjamin Netanyahu's. So to me, it's a foreign government. This is a foreign occupation in Washington. I don't recognize this. It's not an American presidency. It's not an American administration. It's unrecognizable at the moment. But if you put an Israeli flag over the White House right now, it's perfectly familiar, and I understand completely.
Patrick, part of this war is what's going on between Israel and Lebanon, and we know that Donald Trump today announced that it's going to be extended, the ceasefire. They're going to have 3 weeks of extension. And then here comes the question, what is this ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel? It seems that it is between the government in Lebanon and the Israeli government, while they're attacking Lebanon in the southern part of Lebanon. So what does that mean? And we've seen how Hezbollah is capable of firing back at them. And at this time, I think they understand the problem, the shortage on the part of Israelis when it comes to the interceptors, and they cannot hit each and every rocket going to Israel because of the shortage they're facing, the interceptors. And this is a huge problem, not only on the part of Israel, but also, as it was reported in New York Times, Washington Post, on CNN, that the United States is running short of ammunition, running short of interceptors and cruise missiles. Your understanding of that?
Well, again, we'll go back to the whole point of the United States' military orientation in the Persian Gulf and the Middle East. Okay, while it was originally there to, it's always been there to protect Israel, but it's also to provide at least the veneer of defense for the Gulf GCC countries, the Arab states. And that was always in the U.S. interest, because effectively the United States is protecting their petrodollar. And not only that, they're making huge amounts of money by selling weapons to the Gulf Arabs. And so it's kind of it's a protection racket on one hand, and it's a huge moneymaker for the military industrial complex. And also, Aramco, that whole concern in Saudi Arabia, the consortium of U.S. companies, which it used to be a U.S. consortium. It's not now, but it was before. So the Gulf has changed. So really what's left for the U.S. is to provide a giant Iron Dome for Israel. That's the main function of the U.S., from Djibouti to Diego Garcia to the Persian Gulf to every other U.S. facility in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, of course, all these other ones, although a lot of the Bahrain's offline, so is Kuwait for the most part. But Iraq, previously, the U.S. had a position in Iraq, northeastern Syria, Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey, plus whatever they have going in Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan, and in Israel as well. So that was all to protect Israel, all of it. And we've seen that. This has been proven now. True Promise 1, 2, 3, 4. We see. And the U.S. naval assets positioned to do that. Their first priority, interceptors, defend Israel from Iranian missiles. Number one priority. And Iranian drones. Number one priority. Gulf Arabs second. Gulf Arabs second. And herein lies the problem. So not only are they not protecting the Gulf Arab countries, they're also drawing fire to the Gulf Arab countries, because the Gulf Arab countries have become accessories to these war crimes by the United States and Israel. So now we're in a totally different region now. and totally different situation. Add to that the depletion, as you mentioned, of U.S. Munitions, interceptors, and just the general redundancy and fatigue of U.S. naval assets that Donald Trump thinks he can move around like a game of Battleship on the board. And Pete Hegseth, while he's up all night doing whatever he does late at night with a bottle of whatever on the table, planning out the operation, like the one snatching the enriched uranium from Isfahan, that great special forces operation planned by Pete Hegseth and Delta Force, a total failure. Okay, so they're not done with their failures, these guys. So that's going to be the main problem, and so I don't. It's very hard to see how that's sustainable going forward. I don't think that the Gulf Arabs that are the UAE and Saudi Arabia specifically, the main ones, that they can rely on their relationship with the United States to really protect them going forward. So there's all sorts of big red flags for the U.S. I really don't know what they're expecting to achieve here in the next couple of weeks. I really don't know. They can unload what they have left, which is not much, but forget about jets coming in at close range and doing, gravity glide bombs. That's not going to work, as we saw with the various shoot downs of U.S. aircraft. The U.S. public doesn't have the stomach for any F-35s dropping from the sky, nor do they have the stomach for one U.S. naval destroyer sinking to the bottom of the Gulf of Oman, which is very likely to happen if hostilities resume. That's the one thing that will be the image attached to Donald Trump. Not only that, imagine a U.S. B-1 or B-2 bomber shot down. Okay, has happened before over Yugoslavia. So if that happens, that's the game changer, because that means that air power and total air supremacy is not guaranteed. Then this story is over at that point. It's really over, unless the U.S. want to further escalate, as we said, with unconventional weapons. And then that's another story we're into, unfortunately, there. So it's really hard, Nima, to see where the potential benefits are, even pursuing this militarily. And then they're saying, well, we've got all the time in the world. That's what Donald Trump says. He doesn't have all the time in the world. Politically, he doesn't. He's on a short leash, and then economically, he's on an even shorter leash. Militarily, he's really, they're running on fumes, the U.S. If they attempt a ground invasion of any description whatsoever, this could only be viewed as a huge act of desperation and a huge act of vanity. And, you can't underestimate, Nima, in these situations historically, the arrogance that comes along with a megalomaniac or a dictator. There's storied tales throughout history of, dictators and autocrats that have just lost their mind and are literally throwing men at the front line in the hopes that somehow they're going to teach their opponent a lesson. And I think that level of arrogance could seep in where there are people. Donald Trump, he does not care about U.S. soldiers. Okay, he himself is a draft dodger. It's the last person you want to be giving orders for ground invasions. He doesn't care. At some point, he might decide that U.S. manpower are expendable, because the way that he speaks about the Korean War and the Vietnam War, that's no big deal. It's okay. We're doing our war differently. That was a bad war. That's what I forgot. It was J.D. Vance saying past U.S. presidents weren't as smart as Donald Trump. He said this week. That's why we don't have to be worried with Trump, because all the past presidents that presided over all those other wars, they were stupid. Not Trump. He's different. Trump's a cut above the rest. He's a stable genius. But by saying that, J.D. Vance, as the 41-year-old neophyte, he's disrespecting all of the U.S. veterans that died in massive numbers in those various conflicts. So that means that they probably don't really respect the lives of U.S. servicemen, that they're basically forcing into an illegal war, propagandizing the hell out of them, to get them to think that somehow what they're doing is justified or legal. And then basically these people will not, Trump and Vance and all these crazed maniacs that are occupying the White House now, these glorified Israeli surrogates, they have no problem throwing U.S. servicemen into the fray as cannon fodder. In their minds, they think that this is a holy war at this point. They're saying this is the crusade to defeat Iran, and from the Christian Zionist point of view, of which Hegseth himself is an adherent. He's actually a member of that cult. He's a Third Temple cultist. The self-styled Secretary of War. So if it's a holy war, then you don't have any problem committing, a few thousand or maybe even 100,000 U.S. soldiers in service of a greater cause, a holy cause. So, and he's not alone, by the way. And Trump's surrounded by all these religious fanatics putting their hands on him in these embarrassing scenes of preying on the president. It's so they accuse Iran of being a theocracy. They accuse Islamic Republic of Iran of being a religious extremist regime. I don't think so. No, it's not extreme at all. It's very rational, level-headed if you compare it to the Americans right now, and a president that's tweeting out that he's the second coming of Jesus Christ. He's done that. He's the Messiah. So who are the religious fanatics from the global perspective? What the world's looking at America and this president, and they're laughing at the country. They're laughing at this president. What a clown and a joke he's become to himself, past the point of shame. And they have the temerity to point the finger around and calling other countries religious extremists or theocrats. You got to be kidding me. It's like, I mean, so we're at a really difficult, it's a really dangerous point because the public in America are very disengaged from this, Nima. I'm in America right now. I go out in the street. Nobody cares about this war. They don't. They care a little bit more in Europe because they're getting hit a lot harder economically. And they're more in proximity. They're closer to the conflict, of course. And they might very well receive the brunt of massive waves of refugees if the conflict does escalate and become worse. Europe will bear the brunt of that. But Americans don't care. Generally, they don't. You travel around them. I've been traveling around this country. They really don't care. A very small number of people do. And there's a lot of people that are pushing back and are vocal against this illegal war, against this regime in Washington. But on the whole, it's not really an issue Americans are taking seriously. And hence, they're not really interrogating any of the claims or statements being made by Washington or through their media mouthpieces. And they won't really start taking it seriously, Nima, until the economy hits the wall, and it's going to happen. And even if Trump walked away and did a fake peace agreement, like he signs some paper himself and pretends that some Iranian signed it or somebody, he'll probably get like Steve Witkoff's buddy, who's like, got a pawn shop in New Jersey or something, and an Iranian guy, and he'll have him sign it. He'll say, this is the new president. It'll be like Juan Guaido. They'll find some Iranian somewhere to be like the next president. And they'll just go with that for a while, until the next wave of this crisis comes. I don't know where they're going to go on this. It has to be a removal of Donald Trump from office. That's the only off-ramp. Or I've ruled out an epiphany. I don't think it's possible with this president. He's just too ignorant and stupid. And he's doubling down. He's employed the methods of his mentor, the mob lawyer Roy Cohn, which is never admit you're wrong and double down. And that's the Israeli negotiations and diplomacy tactic. So I don't know. It's very difficult to see daylight here.
Patrick, Donald Trump tweeted today that actually on his Truth Social, he posted that he talked with the Prime Minister of Armenia And he said that the guy totally understands the situation. You know how fragile, how weak Iran is, and he's ready to give us his, the bases in, airfields in his country to us to use against Iran. And later on, he removed that post. I don't know why did he remove it, and it was something from his administration or Armenia contacted him. But after all, Armenia, how can someone believe that Armenia could bring something new or something, some sort of game changer, factor to the conflict? This guy gonna get this? It's a little country. Population is not even considerable. It's little, and they're gonna be destroyed like the other GCC countries. And do you think that Donald Trump, it was something made up? Because he said, if you don't negotiate with us in a good faith, if you don't have some sort of agreement with us, we're going to use Armenia against you. What does that mean? I don't see Armenia being that stupid. I don't know.
No, they're not. They're not. But you have a puppet, Pashinyan, and the people that have been backed by U.S. interests and vassalized for this very reason. But actually pulling that off is another thing altogether. Okay, so and that brings us back to the Lebanon question, which you asked before, Nima, which I didn't answer, which I will. That's the problem with the Lebanese government, is it's basically a U.S.-Israeli puppet regime. The president and the prime minister in Michel Aoun and Nawaf Salam in Lebanon, I mean, they've sold out their country. They have sold them out in the worst possible way. So it's a facade of negotiations between Israel and Lebanon. By the way, it's illegal for their leaders to be negotiating with the Israelis because I believe that's against the law in Lebanon. So they're in violation of their own laws. Israel's carpet bombing Lebanon, killing civilians, massacring Lebanese, bombing Beirut indiscriminately at will, not apologizing for it, and putting boots on the ground, occupying South Lebanon with the intent of keeping it, annexing it, as they're annexing Golan Heights right now. Settlers are now, as we speak, moving into the Golan Heights in Syria with the full approval of the United States, of Israel, of course, but also of the Al-Qaeda caliph, if you will, the self-styled president in Damascus, Mohammed al-Jalani, a.k.a. al-Sharar. That's what's going to happen in South Lebanon. Settlers are going to want to make claims, and Ben-Gvir will be right up there in the front, cheering them on with Bezalel Smotrich and everybody else. And so they're raising whole Lebanese villages that have been there for thousands of years and raising them to the ground. And Israel's destroying Christian holy sites, and they're getting away with it. But if Israel occupy South Lebanon militarily, Iran can, with missile accuracy, destroy all of the Israeli encampments and bases. That's what's going to happen. That's why there's a ceasefire. That's why Lebanon is part of the negotiations. But Israel already broke the ceasefire. Israel are destroying infrastructure and buildings and homes, schools, churches. They're wiring them with explosives, and then they're turning to the international community and saying, hey, this isn't a violation of the ceasefire because we're not firing anything. We're just blowing it up. But and we're targeting journalists, and those are targeted strikes. So those aren't a violation of the ceasefire because we're targeting journalists and not soldiers. So therefore, it's not a violation of the ceasefire. This is the really twisted, depraved mentality of the Israeli at the moment. They've just had they're killing with impunity, and so that this ceasefire is a facade with Lebanon, and Israel is just waiting for time to regroup and maximize its gains and consolidate its positions because it needs that fresh water supply from the Litani River. They see it as an existential issue for the state of Israel. They want to expand their borders. They're very open about that. And everyone's still in denial, saying, oh, there's no such thing as the Greater Israel Project. It's a conspiracy theory. It's anti-Semitic to even suggest such a thing, even though Benjamin Netanyahu himself publicly stated that is their ambition this past fall. He publicly stated that this is the Greater Israel Project. You're watching it unfold, and it's not going to stop in South Lebanon or Syria. It also includes Jordan and parts of Saudi Arabia and Egypt as well. Forget about the West Bank and Gaza. It's gone as far as their plans are concerned. So, but the government in Lebanon has really the United States has spent decades buying off sections of the Lebanese society, particularly the Christian community, in order to make it pro-U.S., to make it loyal to the United States. And they're sort of like Zionists in a way, because part of the payoff for this elite class in Lebanon was the United States will give U.S. passports to basically everybody in all of their families. So without even having, in some cases, haven't even gone to America. So much less being born there or even established any residence. So that's just part of the payoff. And they've done this strategically, and also with USAID contracts, giving money to certain families, influential Lebanese families, for, quote, projects over the years. And then just cash payoffs, of course. The CIA are probably very involved in that. And they have allowed Israeli intelligence and Israeli activity and Israeli companies into Lebanon as well. So it's been a slow process of degrading what used to be an independent state, Lebanon, in order to isolate Hezbollah. And now the special envoy, Tom Barak, is openly touting for a civil war, openly setting Lebanese against each other, factions, religious factions against each other, to say, well, you need to help disarm Hezbollah. And then Israel saying the same thing. So that's the chorus from the U.S. and Israel. We must disarm Hezbollah. And the bought off class in Lebanon's going along with it. And while the Lebanese, they're watching their own people be slaughtered by the Israelis, and they have nothing to say against the Israelis about it. They just sit back and, twiddle their fingers and hope that it's going to stop, hope that it's going to go away. The only people defending Lebanon are Hezbollah. And they're not a terror. They'll say, the Americans will say it's a terrorist organization. Well, under international law, it's defined as an armed liberation struggle against an illegal occupation, because Israel never stopped occupying parts of Lebanese territory, even before this wave of the crisis began. They still had stolen Lebanese land and were threatening Lebanon. That's why Hezbollah existed in the first place. It wouldn't have existed without Israel having decades illegally occupied and brutalized the people in South Lebanon. And the United States was fine with that. They did nothing to restrain Israel in any meaningful way. And it's even worse. Now the U.S. is encouraging a civil war and encouraging Israel to come in, kill, and occupy. So this is the worst possible situation for a country like Lebanon. And so that's why this is why Iran made this part of the negotiations, because it's about the threat that Israel poses to the region. And it's because Israel can use Lebanon against Iran. Iranians know this. Israel uses Lebanon and threats of aggression or promises to withdraw or ceasefire. They're using that as leverage against Tehran via the United States. So this is all part of the same equation. You can't separate these issues. And so Iran is looking at this holistically and treating it as one theater. And because it is one theater, you can't separate it. And Israel and the U.S. have proven that their aggression will not be confined to Gaza or to this part or that part. They will attack and declare war against anyone in the region, and they already have, against Yemen, against the Palestinians, against the Lebanese, against Syria, against Iraq, and against Iran. So it's very clear for people who live in the region who the main threat of violence and aggression comes from and security comes from. And it's very clear. It is Israel and the United States. Those are the two number one threats to security, peace, and prosperity in West Asia. There's no question about it. Everyone who lives in the region knows that. But we have this narrative that's being imposed from the outside for a Western audience and for an Israeli audience and for a Gulf audience. But that's not reality. Everyone in East Asia understands this. They fully understand it now. So we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Patrick, for being with us today. Please go to 21st Century Wire and to support Patrick, patrickhenningsen.substack.com, and your YouTube channel as well, Patrick. I'm going to put all the links in the description of this video. People can go there and find all the links. You can support Patrick and his work.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Hima.
so much,
I
Patrick.
appreciate that. Yeah.